Maness has a lifelong record of providing dedicated service to this nation. Having worked his way up from the enlisted ranks to full colonel, he served our country for more than 32 years. He has served as a bomber squadron commander, bomb disposal technician, Joint Chiefs of Staff Operations Officer, assisted the National Security Team with the campaign plan for the global war on terrorism. He authored the first theater nuclear war plan and served as the Vice Commander of America's largest airborne intelligence wing. Colonel Rob Maness is a true American hero. This is Rob Maness Live.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody, and I appreciate you being here. It's great to be here. It's great to talk to some of the incredible people that we have, both at the local level, the Texas state level, and also, of course, our federal border patrol, who are doing so many good things to keep us safe. And I have some bad news and some good news. And the bad news is that because of what Joe Biden did at the southern border for 4 years, we had record increases in migrant crime, in fentanyl deaths, and in just floods and floods of people who shouldn't be in our country who came into the United States of America. We also have a number of ways in which the cartels became more advanced, better war fighters, because Joe Biden opened up the American southern border and allowed the cartels to turn it into their playground. Now, that's the bad news. The good news is, as President Trump said last night at the State of the Union, it turns out we didn't need new laws. We didn't need fancy legislation. We just needed a new president of the United States, and thank God that's exactly what we have. And I will say that the most heartening message that I take away from my visit here at the Texas border is the number of Border Patrol agents who have come up to me and said thank you, or said because of this, we've cut the number of border crossings from 1,500 a day to 30 a day. Or the people who have come up and said we've seen a reduction in 85% of the number of people who are dying at the American southern border. And every single day that we continue to keep this border safe, that means less migrant crime, that means less fentanyl coming into our communities, that means more safety and security for the people of the United States of America. And of course, we know the border problem, the border crisis under Biden's administration was a national crisis, but it acutely affected the communities right here. And I've already heard heartbreaking stories of people who are still picking up the pieces, local mayors who are still dealing with the budgetary consequences of what the Joe Biden administration allowed to happen at the American southern border. And that, too, is something that President Trump is going to help address, help fix, and help solve. Now,
headline: Trump administration implements real border security. Welcome back to Transition Tuesday. The Rob Maness Show is live on Worldview Tube, our X Spaces simulcast, Rumble, YouTube, Truth Social Plus, Amazon Fire, and Roku. Well, we hear it all the time. Quote, we need a whole of government approach, unquote, to this or that. But if you want to see how that concept really works in action, just take a moment to observe the Trump administration's amazing work securing the borders, I said borders, and the interior from illegal aliens, human trafficking, drug trafficking, and countering terrorism from the drug cartels, transnational violent gangs, Islamists, and Chinese nationals.
You are muted,
the administration immediately started its mass deportation program on the first day in office. It's deployed the U.S. military combat power to the southern border. It's utilizing our exceptional intelligence capabilities to support the Mexican government and target the cartels, as exhibited by the recent arrests of 29 cartel leaders and their deportation over here. It's using President Trump's tariff programs to convince Mexico and Canada to enforce border security and reduce, if not stop, the flow of drugs like fentanyl. All of this has resulted in that dramatic decrease in illegal crossings that you heard, 30 from 1,500. And it's expected to stop the flow of deadly drugs like fentanyl into our country. My guest today is Victor Avila, a retired ICE HSI special agent U.S. diplomat. He's an author. He has run for Congress. He's the chairman of a PAC that he founded. Victor dedicated his life to protecting the United States from illegals drug smuggling, and especially human trafficking. He still carries a bullet in his leg from a deadly ambush by cartel hitmen to prove it. Victor continues his service, and as I mentioned, he's run for Congress. And in addition, his continuing work to secure the American people through advocacy is extremely important. Victor, welcome to the Rob Maness Show, sir. It's good to see you again.
Colonel, it's an honor to be with you. Thank you.
Hey, I appreciate you coming on. You know, there's a lot of information and ground to cover on border security and our interior security, man. And one of the big things that I think is going on this week is this discussion about the continuing resolution. And one of the reasons why the president needs to get this big reconciliation bill done is because he needs more funding for border security. Do you think we're going to be able to do that?
I think so. I think it's going to pass, and strictly and specifically because of that, it's really to fund the rest of ICE, the rest of DHS, with the monies that they requested. One of the things that I've been hearing a lot is the bed space. We're really concerned with bed space, but I'm getting calls from a lot of contractors that are ready. They have thousands of beds ready, and they're ready to negotiate with the government for these contracts. So it's just a matter of getting the funding through and then getting these contracts issued pretty quickly. So that's not going to be an issue. That's not going to be an excuse about the slowdown of arrests or any like that. We're going to have the places built, some that are already built. They just need to be approved to then start filling them up with illegals.
Yeah, didn't we have a lot of detention facilities, even specifically for kids, designed that way intentionally, and those kind of things all across the southern border? What happened to all those?
I said it from the very beginning that I would love to turn those into detention facilities. I've been to a lot of them, from El Paso, Eagle Pass, Del Rio, Donna facility, all those, the Laredo. There's a lot of them, and they're huge. And yes, let's use them, but instead of a processing in, let's use them as a processing out. Some of them, I understand it's a little bit more difficult to turn it into a detention facility because now you're talking safety. Now you're talking detention, meaning certain people are designated and categorized, and they're not just all put in the same place. So I hope they do. They're already built. We already paid for them. Might as well use them.
Yeah, exactly right. So during this show, we're going to use several clips from that long press conference that Vice President Vance had with Hegseth and Gabbard. But let's talk about some of the other organizations in this whole of government approach, Victor. What other capabilities are being pulled in to support both the Border Patrol and ICE and now the Defense Department and the DNI's capabilities? What are the smaller pieces of the government that we need to be aware of?
This is the best that I've ever seen in my career. We're talking about Department of Justice. We're talking about DEA, FBI, U.S. Marshal Service, a lot of three-letter agencies here calling Homeland Security Investigations, calling ICE, ERO, and saying, what do you need from me? And my colleagues and friends are calling me and saying, wait, I've never gotten a call. I certainly never got that call in my 20-year career, but this is a good thing. This is the collaboration that we need from all these agencies because this is the priority right now. And I know they're working out some kinks through there because some of these agents are not used to doing this. Second of all is the deputizing of the National Guard. We've always, that I'm familiar with. I work with the National Guard all the time, and they're great to work with. But now they've been given the authority to actually detect and detain people on the line. That's huge. The same goes for some military members. We got Marines down on the border. We've got in Texas over 300 Texas DPS troopers also deputized under federal immigration law. This is why you're seeing at least Texas for sure being fortified at the border, trickling areas in New Mexico, Arizona, and California. Why? Because the governors there don't want to cooperate on the state level. But nevertheless, the federal government is heavily present.
Yeah, you go down there all the time. Have you been down there since Trump took office to see what the lay of the land is now and compare it to what it looked like in December at the end of the Biden administration?
I've been one time, and It is. Well, there was nothing going on. It was pretty dead. And there were still those confused that thought that maybe they would have a chance to come in. But the difference now is that anyone that, you heard these terms, anyone that was encountered or apprehended the last 4 years, the difference is that they were then admitted into the U.S. And so that's why when the Biden administration apprehended 1 million, it didn't apprehend anybody. They let them in. The difference now is any apprehension is an automatic removal on top of what is happening in the Interior Enforcement.
So when the Customs and Border Patrol folks or their deputized agencies roll up crossers, they're being immediately sent back now, huh?
It's a quick process. We're going to take your information. We're going to fingerprint you. We're going to identify you, first of all, to see if you're a danger. Here's another thing that's also changing. If you prosecutions, you never heard about that. I prosecuted a lot of people for immigration violations and this nonsense that coming into the country is not a criminal act. I don't understand what these Democrats are talking about. But that's another thing that you're going to see the increase. The prosecution of what we call entry without inspections, 1325s, 1326, re-entries. You're going to see them actually be prosecuted. These people are going to go to prison for 1, 2, 4 years. But what happens when you start doing that is that the phone call that the family members and everyone else that they get, because they're not going to believe you or me or President Trump, who they believe is that person that calls them and says, instead of the last 4 years, I made it to New Orleans, I made it to Denver. Now is I didn't make it anywhere. I'm calling you from a federal prison. That's what we need them to send back so they could stop coming.
Yeah, that's a great deterrent, isn't it?
That's the number one deterrent, is their own people telling them, don't come. Because before, they told them all the sacrifices that we got raped, we got extorted, all these huge things, horrible things happened to them. But guess what? I'm in North Carolina. I'm in Minneapolis. And that's all they heard. They didn't care about the dangers. And so now I'm in prison or I'm being deported right back. And I lost the $1,000 that not only that I paid the cartel, maybe even owe them.
Yeah, we heard what Vice President Vance said that Border Patrol folks are saying to him when they were down there last week. What are you hearing from your ICE colleagues and others that have been working this issue for their entire professional lives now that this activity is taking place? Some
of this might be elementary, and I apologize, but it is no more 8 to 5 here. They're out. I can't find them because they're out in the field. I used to be able to find them in the office. And again, that's a good thing. And I'm proud of that because I pride myself as a working agent. And I say that all the time. And people say, what do you mean you were a working agent? Well, I worked. And unfortunately, not everybody does. But now President Trump has sent that order directly. And I'm getting those calls that, man, I got to work this weekend. Oh, I got to work at night. Well, that's what you actually signed up for, because the problem that the destruction that Biden did, it also created this complacency amongst the law enforcement agencies, all of them saying, well, I guess that's the way it is. Well, that's not the way it is. And so we're having to kind of remission everybody and kind of get them all up and going. And you're going to see that even get better throughout the next weeks.
Yeah, I think so. That's how you got wounded, right? When you were ambushed, as you were out working.
I was working.
So, yeah, we definitely appreciate your sacrifice and your friends' sacrifices and everything, because, this is the national defense of the country. And that's why I'm very pleased that President Trump has declared a lot of these cartels, I think the main ones, as foreign terrorist organizations. The gang out of Venezuela is now a foreign terrorist organization. And he's deployed the Department of Defense with some combat power down to the southern border. And we got to take a break, Victor. When we come back, we'll hear from Secretary Hegseth at that press conference a little bit about that. And I want to get your take on why we need that and what capability that's going to bring to the effort to help the guys and gals that are primary mission is to secure this border. And that's the Customs and Border Patrol and ICE. We'll be right back with Victor Avila on the Rob Maness Show.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. I want to thank you for all your support at WVWFoundation.com that helps make possible pushing out 24/7 content for free. Without your support, we'd have to put it all behind a paywall. But thanks to you and your support through our foundation, we're able to push it out for free as a broadcast service and broadcast ministry of WVW Foundation. Please consider going there and setting up an automatic monthly contribution, or go there and make an occasional contribution. If you prefer to support us through the mail, you'll find our mailing address there at WVWFoundation.com. You can also call and make your contribution over the phone by calling 901-825-0652. That's 901-825-0652. Again, all these details are available at WVWFoundation.com. Thank you for your support as we try to help people around the world understand the times through the lens of a Christian worldview.
Well, Mr. Vice President, thank you very much for inviting us. It's great to be here with you, with the director, with our fellow friends in civilian clothes and in other shades of green. This is a demonstration of a true partnership on the southern border. As President Trump has made clear on the campaign trail and from day one and last night, border security is national security. And from the Defense Department, we've watched for a couple of decades other people's borders being secured while ours was open for an invasion of drugs and of violence and of chaos for American communities. That stops under President Trump. And the Defense Department has assets that we can bring to bear, not just troops, not just surveillance, not just equipment, but actual planning and capabilities that enhance what Border Patrol is already doing, which is why it's been incredible to hear from our partners about what we've been able to allow them to do, facilitate them, and we've seen it in the numbers. 98% drop in crossings on the southern border. We're not yet at 100% operational control, but we are on our way because that is the mandate that the president has given us. So more resources are coming to this border. We are dedicated to securing it. That's the reason for our trip and our partnership. And I want to thank all the men and women who've been doing it recently in uniform, who have been doing it a long time right here, have dedicated their lives to securing the American people. And at the Defense Department, we are committed to continuing to being a big part of it. So, Mr. Vice President, thanks for having us.
Absolutely, man.
Appreciate
Thank you.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's Transition Tuesday, and the Trump administration has transitioned at full throttle for border security using the entire United States government. And my guest today is retired ICE special agent, the author, and staunch advocate for border security to protect the American people and interior security, too, to protect us from those that have escaped into the interior or be let in, Victor Avila. And Victor, on the Defense Department's take on this, look, the Defense Department or the Department of War, the U.S. Armed Forces, has been used on the southern border of the United States of America many, many times with combat power, and now we've deployed a Stryker brigade and its airborne aviation element with it down to the southern border. And you heard Pete Hegseth used the term, we haven't gotten operational control yet, but we will eventually get 100% operational control. That has specific meaning to guys like me. And I think it's an incredibly important step. I've advocated it for a long time. What capabilities will this bring to enhance what the Border Patrol and ICE are already doing from their perspective?
Enormous. This is huge. This is what the designation, what we're seeing is because of the designation of these cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. That's why we had never seen this before, other than we had some military resources obviously before, but never to this scale and never to the capabilities. In other words, we're all in now. DOD and Department of Homeland Security, DHS, have literally merged here. Plus, the intelligence community, this is the best. This is where I applaud this because it's the intel that we need. Without the intelligence, we cannot really act on the southern border or anywhere around that region. But what they've already done, they're flying over Mexican airspace overtly. meaning Mexico has given them the permission to do it, mostly on the Arizona, Sonora Desert, Mexico area. And we've got the drones that obviously that used to work covert at one point over Mexico. So all this planning and all this foundation setting that I'm seeing here is for something more to come. And you heard the Secretary of Defense, by the way, he's been to the border twice already, and once in El Paso with Tom Homan, and now this visit. And it's just telling me that you're going to see unprecedented action at the border, something that none of us, a lot of us, we all said, in my colleagues, we had never seen anything about what the Biden administration did because that had never happened. Well, I say that a lot of us are going to say we have never seen what's about to come and happen. And I think they need to have all of these agencies on board, National Guard, Coast Guard, too. Let's not forget the waters, and Air and Marine, and a lot of these agencies come together, grab the intel, share that intel, and kind of reminder of this is one team. And then, of course, the big picture is kind of what is Mexico going to do? Because you have to follow very closely what Mexico is doing in order to what our response is. So something I'm saying, Colonel, a lot is, I don't know, this part, I don't know. Have we been given a reason to do something? Absolutely. We have hundreds of thousands of people dying of fentanyl poisonings and crime by illegal aliens. That's not the point. But at the point that we are right now, is they're going to trigger a response from the cartels per se? Are they going to do something stupid to then say to the U.S. government, here we go, and that's going to be our green light? That's the part that I don't know. Is this going to be a response? I know the cartel is going to have some sort of response, and I've heard it on both sides. Yeah. Some people tell me, some of my colleagues think that they're not going to fight back. I don't believe that. These guys, although they might not have an allegiance to themselves, they have an allegiance to the power, the money, and they're not going to give it up easily. They're not just going to throw their hands up in the air. They're cowards by themselves, and no match for our U.S. military. Nevertheless, you cannot underestimate the level of sophistication that they do have. They are capable of taking down one of our helicopters and killing some of our law enforcement community. So that's what I'm concerned about. Not so much at the border, but at the interior of our country. These cartel members are present here. What are they going to do? Are they going to retaliate by taking out or want to kill our law enforcement agent or officer or a civilian just because? Because I know, and a lot of you know, what they're capable of doing. They don't care. They have no regard for human life. And so that is my concern when it comes to the safety of all this.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we've got a question from the live audience. Let's go ahead and take that. Rob is our host over there. Go ahead, Rob.
Hey, Colonel. Thank you. We have Joseph.
Thank you very much. My question is very simple. Recently, the Congress passed a strange law about tunnels, saying that they want operational control of the tunnels. I mean, is this something that we want Congress to have? I thought we already had control of those tunnels. I'm just curious about that.
Did he say tunnels?
Tunnels, yeah.
Well, yes, and
yeah.
As a matter of fact, it's not confirmed, and this is I'm just getting a lot of calls that there's possibly other tunnels out there. And again, what happens when you put the patrolmen, the border patrol, back on the line? Guess what happens? They're going to start discovering everything that they missed the last 4 years because they haven't been there. So this is expected. All of a sudden, they're finding new tunnels. They're finding all of the activity that has been missed, not missed by them, but missed by the Biden administration, not allowing them to actually drive and actually patrol, and the infrastructure around the wall, where the wall is at, on both sides of the wall. People think that the other side of the wall is Mexico. The majority of where the wall is, both sides of the United States. And so we patrol both sides, and now we're gathering a lot of intel. We're back to doing what we're supposed to do, and Border Patrol is discovering tunnels. The latest one, obviously in El Paso, Texas. I have an understanding there might be more. So so right now, because of the presence of the border, they're not going to be using these tunnels. It's too risky for the cartels now, even if one that hasn't been discovered, to then be discovered. So the cartel is going to use tunnels, They're going back to vehicles. They're going back to backpackers. I'm getting calls from Hudspeth County saying that they're going back to the old places where I used to work, and they're trying to come back and smuggle everything in because they need to bring their fentanyl in. They still need to bring the bodies in. But now what you're seeing is a lot of smuggling ventures. And you're going to see stash houses increase on the U.S. side in El Paso, Laredo, McAllen, where they stash these drugs and these people as they distribute them throughout the U.S. It's harder, meaning the fee has gone up because of that, but it doesn't mean that they're going to stop. And that's what the secretary is talking about when he's saying about 100% control of the southern border, because those gaps still exist.
Yeah, exactly right. When we talk about the United States Armed Forces having operational control, that means of every piece of the border where there's a potential line of communication being a line of logistics or comms or human trafficking, footpaths, those kind of things. And so we want to quickly get operational control of the border, because there are ungoverned spaces and unwalled, unfenced. There might be a signpost every couple of miles in some cases along the southern border, right, Victor?
I've been to many places where it's just wide open, and I would be the first one to tell you I want a wall here. And so hopefully those places east of El Paso, east of Hudspeth County, Culberson County in Texas, I wish there was some kind of barrier, because we need it. I used to investigate vehicles loaded with drugs that would be driven over, because the Rio Grande has very little water in that area. And it would just drive their vehicles through, or the backpackers would come around and dump their drugs. So they're starting to go back to those type of tactics, because they know that they're trying to figure out now where Border Patrol is not going to be for that small amount of time to do it. And so it's just starting to funnel. And that's what we want. We want to funnel that traffic to where we can have the eyes and bodies on it. But it takes time to get there. One of the things is actually personnel. Border Patrol, before Biden took over, we're almost at 20,000 Border Patrol agents. They're down to 16,000 is my understanding. So the Border Patrol and the recruitment is really good right now. It's going up. But it's going to take time to put people there on these places to finally cover and have some kind of obstruction for the smugglers to get through.
Yeah, I think there might be some manpower available. The Internal Revenue Service, I'm hearing, is going to terminate a bunch of agents that were hired under the Biden administration. And I'm hearing that the Department of Veterans Affairs is going to terminate about 80,000 personnel that'll be looking for jobs, too, because it's a bloated organization, again, designed by the Biden administration. And as a victim of that organization, sometimes I can fully support that. When I think about this military capability, and I want to touch on this in the next segment here, we got about a minute to go to the break. I think about the intelligence capabilities that I used to help command in the 55th Wing platforms called the Rivet Joint aircraft and those kind of things. And we've already seen some flying out over Baja California and looking into the interior and those kind of things. But we've also got a lot more capes that we can apply in addition to just our strategic assets. One of the challenges we faced in the war in Afghanistan was that mountainous region on the northeastern and eastern border. And they would actually put pack mule trains together to smuggle arms, ammunition, food, supplies, and people into the Taliban from Pakistan and those kind of areas. And in my old platform, the B-1 bomber, we had a ground-moving target indicator capability on the radar. So we could pick up trucks and those kind of things. But we could use, and there might be some B-1 bombers stationed right there in Texas, in Abilene, Texas. A little pop-up capability. Well, we got to take another break, Victor. When we come back, we'll hear from Tulsi Gabbard, the DNI, and it's never been where the entire intelligence apparatus of the United States is focused on securing our borders. It is now. And we got some really good capabilities, so we'll talk about it in the next segment. I'll be right back with Victor Avila.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, for your leadership in bringing the country's attention to what has been happening here at the border and the significant change that has already occurred under the short time that President Trump has been in office. Really, what you're seeing here today and what you'll continue to see is a unified effort across President Trump's national security team, the Department of Homeland Security, towards our mission, which is to ensure a safe, free, and prosperous society for Americans. As Director of National Intelligence, there are a number of areas where we are focused. The President talked about in his speech, over 21 million people have come across our borders illegally under Joe Biden's administration. There are many of them that we don't know who they are. They have not been vetted. We don't know where they are. I'll give you one quick example of one of the problems that we are getting after. From Central Asia, there were over 4,000 people who came across our borders using an ISIS-affiliated network. Our National Counterterrorism Center went through and identified those individuals. There were hundreds of them who were either known terrorists or associated with known terrorists. That information was provided to the Biden administration. You may remember in some of the news, a little over 100 of those people were arrested in 2024. Of those who were arrested, only 8 were either deported or remained in custody. Only 8. The rest of them were released back into our country. Where are they? What are they doing? What may they be plotting? This is just the beginning. There are many, many areas that we need to stay very focused on, working with Department of Homeland Security, working with the FBI to ensure that we're keeping the American people safe. Our Counterterrorism Center is working on making sure that we have that single source for vetting so that we can figure out who is actually in our country and identify those who pose a threat and get them removed. The president's designation of the cartels as foreign terrorist organizations falls directly into this, especially as we're seeing some of the tactics that these cartels are using reflect some of the tactics that we've seen used by Islamist terrorists in countries that many of us have served in overseas. Our mission is very clear. Our objective is to keep the American people safe. I'm grateful to be a part of this team that President Trump has assembled to accomplish that mission. Thank you.
Great. Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. We're live on Worldview Tube and our X Spaces simulcasts and our Rumble show and YouTube and everywhere else, including Roku today. And my guest is ICE Special Agent retired Victor Avila, who's also an author. He's an advocate for border security and interior security and is continuing to try to encourage the building of capability in that fight so that we can win this effort and get ourselves interior-wise and on the borders as secure as absolutely possible. And Victor, we just heard, from DNI Tulsi Gabbard there. She kind of touched on a little bit of why us military folks that have fought the war in Afghanistan are very pleased with the actions of the Trump administration as regards to national security and internal security in the United States, because, these cartels are using the same tactics that we've seen from the Islamists, of which, as she said, there are probably thousands in this country. And there's a nexus growing between Chinese military-age males. We just rolled up Chinese intelligence operatives inside the United States Army as active duty people. And there have been hundreds of thousands come through that open border. So we have this nexus of the cartels, the Islamic terrorists, potential Chinese fifth column and saboteurs, and they are going to use the kind of tactics the U.S. military has been combating for years, decades, really, for a long time. But one of the questions that I've heard asked recently, Victor, and I wanted to give you a chance to address this, is I actually heard a press person, I hate to call them a press person because they're just propagandists at this point, say, why do you need the military down here? They're just drug cartels. They sell drugs. What capabilities have you seen that the cartel has that it requires a Stryker brigade to completely overpower them with our combat power?
Let's start with the drones dropping bombs, IEDs, car bombs, you name it. I do a presentation about comparing the cartels to terrorist organizations. As a matter of fact, my question is, should they be designated as FTOs? I've been talking about this for years. I'm updating that as we speak because I'm so glad that they finally are. But when you compare ISIS or the Sinaloa cartel or Cartel Jalisco New Generation, most of the time you can't even tell which is the terrorist without showing the name. As a matter of fact, the cartels in Mexico are more violent, have killed more Americans than any of the other terrorist organizations combined. And for some reason, I don't know why, I don't know if it's because they're in Mexico or because we call them cartels and we don't call them terrorists. But this is where the mentality and the messaging that I'm trying to put out is they're not just drug cartels. They used to be. They used to be DTOs, drug trafficking organizations. But the drug trafficking organizations evolved into what we have now is foreign terrorist organizations. Why? Because they're involved in way more than narcotics. Obviously, the humans, both in smuggling and trafficking and the exploitation of that person. They're extorting the lime farmers. They're extorting the avocado farmers. They're extorting the tractor trailers that come across that border that bring our goods at $350 a piece, every single driver. And I'm going to tell you, Mexican nationals are sick and tired of being extorted just because they're having a successful business and they're trying to feed their families. But then they get a knock on the door from the cartel asking for their cut. Extortion, kidnapping, murder, dismemberments, violent. You heard about the 9 students that were just killed probably last week, coming back from from spring break in Oaxaca. Dismembered, not just killed, but dismembered, and their hands and their feet found in different locations. This is what Mexico is experiencing. So yes, that's the difference, and that's what categorizes them as terrorists. The sophistication of the cartels, it cannot be underestimated. Why? Because this is why I love the the U.S. intel community getting heavily involved, because they've had their own intel community for a long time. And who is the cartel? Who are the cartel intel people? I'll tell you who they are. They're CPAs, they're lawyers, they're teachers, they're clerks at the courthouse in the U.S. And people sometimes say, oh, how can you make that such a claim? Well, I'm telling you, based on experience of people that I've arrested, they work at law firms. They have people everywhere giving them information, making them a cartel member, or at least an associate of a cartel member, giving them information because that's how they operate. When you have a strong hold on the intel, you could operate 2-3 steps ahead of law enforcement. So what I'm seeing right now is turning that around, where the U.S. will have the 2 or 3 day or 2 or 3 steps ahead on the intelligence, because it's 2 intelligence here that we're gathering. Actually 3. You got the interior of Mexico, you got the border intel, and then you have the interior of the United States. We're having to concentrate, and all of that obviously comes together. But there's different approaches to that intelligence. I know I don't have to tell you about it, but it's very different focuses, right? I know one of the focuses is identify 100 super labs in Mexico that are making the methamphetamine and the fentanyl. Or what's going to happen with those? Are we going to take those out? I don't know. I know is that at least we're gathering the intel. We need to know where they're at. They're somewhere in the jungles. They're somewhere in these remote areas, and some not. People think that everything is out remote. Sometimes it's just in plain sight, these laboratories. So we got to start somewhere, and the way you start is by methodically grabbing all the intel, putting the personnel in place, and then you're ready to move.
Yeah, and the intelligence world and the defense intelligence world coming together, we have a massive capability to take in the information, to analyze it, and then exploit it and get it disseminated back out to the users at the ground level, the folks that are operationally controlling that border in a timely manner. And heretofore, and I'm proud to say, it just was announced, the Ukrainians have agreed to a 30-day ceasefire in their talks with Secretary Rubio and National Security Advisor Waltz over in Saudi Arabia, and that means we can probably even bring more capability home and get it focused on this, because we have aircraft we can put up all along the southern border and keep those platforms airborne 24/7 for extended periods of time, that can not just collect on these guys with intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, but the reconnaissance piece, and like I mentioned, ground moving target indicators, picking up that infrared to see human trains coming across. All of those things, we could do this, but the resources just haven't been available up until now. So I'm very excited about that. Do the cartels use law enforcement officers of some sort that have been co-opted or infiltrated too, in addition to the folks like CPAs and bankers that you talked about and clerks?
Unfortunately, they do. There was just another one that was just announced a couple of weeks ago, CBP officer working with the cartels, and he considered himself a cartel member. I mean, this is, I personally arrested 2 in my career, a corrupt Border Patrol agent and a female CBP inspector. It's a shame. I don't like to talk about it much, but it's a shame. But we have to, because it does exist. Why? Because billions of dollars are flowing on that border, and it touches our law enforcement as well, not just at the federal level, but at the state and local level as well. And of course, we know on the other side, they're all corrupt. Especially the municipal and state police on the borders are just unreliable. That's why our special forces are over there training their special forces, La Marina. And that's another step that we have failed to mention. They're in there already. I say training in air quotes, but nevertheless, showing them our capabilities of what we can do. Those are the most trusted individuals that even DHS used when I was in the country. So that's a good thing. But it's a good point. You cannot underestimate and not ignore the corruption on both sides of the border.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. I forgot to mention it too. You know, I've long been an advocate of using our special operations forces, getting them out of places like Afghanistan and Iraq and Europe, and getting them home to the southern border so that we can use that national security asset. And yes, we have men that are inside Mexico advising the Mexican special operations forces, the law enforcement forces, and other government agencies, and they do participate in these, because we're not going to demand that they stay unarmed and not be able to defend themselves or help out if they're out on an operation. So we should expect that. And this is not going to be pretty, is it, Victor? I mean, it's you mentioned the students on the side of the road dismembered in different locations. I mean, these people are probably more violent than the ISIS fighters that we've seen that, line people up and cut their throats all at once in a video to make a point, aren't they?
Hands down, more violent. The Los Zetas who killed my partner are the ones that initiated this level of violence, medieval violence of beheadings. And I don't even want to watch the videos. They send me these videos. I don't even want to watch them anymore. They're so grotesque. But sometimes you have to say it. I don't like showing. I'm not a gratuitous violence guy. I don't like showing them a lot. But I like telling people what they're capable of. They'll rip your heart out of your chest while you're still alive, and they'll show you your heart pounding on the palm of their hand. They'll cut off your head and display it or play soccer with it. This is a different level of violence that was introduced because of the terrorism and gaining the territory. And so guess what? The other cartels said, well, we got to do the same in order to compete against these guys. So the violence is really, really out of control. They just found a clandestine mass a place where they were really getting rid of bodies. And they had these huge ovens where they found about 400 pairs of shoes, and they disappeared people there by incinerating them, basically, in the state of Jalisco, which is the cartel Jalisco New Generations area. And so this is how sophisticated. They'll kill you, they'll torture you, and then they'll disappear. That's why there was almost 200,000 homicides in Mexico during the tenure of President AMLO, and about almost 1,000 people missing. And I'm not talking about a child or Amber Alert. I'm talking about adults missing, just wiped out of it because the cartels will dissolve them in acid or put them in an incinerator.
Yeah, and these cartels operations extend well into the interior of the United States. And in the last segment, we'll hear from J.D. Vance again about Tom Homan's deportation operation. And I want to dive into that with you. You're an expert in that area, too. And it's just as important as our forces with combat power and law enforcement forces looking outward as it is for us to be looking inward, maybe even more important, because a lot of people here in America are still asleep and not paying attention. We'll be right back with Victor Avila. It's Transition Tuesday, and we're talking border security the American way.
Hello, I'm Brandon House. Is the government tracking you? Do they have access to all your data? Well, if you go to worldviewtalk.com, you'll find out about a cell phone company that, well, does not store your data. They don't do that. This is what they're known for. They don't store your data. You have privacy. You're not being tracked. That's why a lot of folks are turning to worldviewtalk.com. You'll find their prices are very competitive. All the details are there at worldviewtalk.com. Again, worldviewtalk.com. Oh, while you're there, not only do they have cell phones that aren't tracking you, you can find out about how to get a satellite phone. Should the whole system go down and you want to communicate with a family member or a loved one, you might want to have a satellite phone. Or how about their solar generators? They have great solar generators. Check them all out right now. Worldviewtalk.com, worldviewtalk.com.
It is impossible to do without the men and women on the ground who are actually doing the hard work. They just want to be empowered to do their jobs. President Trump has made that possible. So from the bottom of my heart and for a grateful nation, to every person I've met here today, thank you for working hard on the American people's business. It's been an honor to be with you. It's been an honor to see what you do, and we're going to keep on supporting you over the next 4 years. Congressman Gonzalez, thank you for being here, and thank you for your leadership. And now we'll take some questions from reporters. Sir.
So, as you guys have been exemplifying for today, that border crossings are down. A lot of attention has been turned to the interior, since obviously there's been a lot of illegal immigrants. What is, in your opinion, the biggest obstacle to actually carrying out President Trump's mass deportations? Even though, yes, like apprehensions and arrests and deportations have gone up in his first month, but a lot of people are expecting a bigger capacity for deportation. So what's the biggest hurdle?
So let me say a few things about that. So first of all, Rome wasn't built in a day, and we have seen pretty significant increases in deportations and apprehensions and arrests. But we have to remember that President Biden gutted the entire immigration enforcement regime of this country. We are trying to rebuild so that we actually empower people to enforce the immigration laws of the American people. It is common sense. It's what the American people want us to do. There are a couple of other things that we're working on. And I don't want to get ahead of any public announcements, but one of the ways that we want to make sure that we're enforcing our border is that we make it easier for people who are here illegally to go back home of their own accord. We don't want to have to go around and arrest every person, but we will enforce the American people's immigration laws. If you're here illegally, the message from our administration is you should go back home, and if you want to come to the United States, apply through the proper channels. That's an important thing that we're doing. And the final thing is this costs money. One of the most important parts of the president's reconciliation priorities is, of course, tax reform on the one hand, and on the other hand, making sure that we get proper resources so that we can pay for the flights, and we can pay for the detention centers, and we can pay for all the components necessary to ensure that we're re-migrating illegal immigrants back to their country of origin. I guarantee it is a part of the president's priorities. We'll keep on working on it. We've made a lot of progress, but we're going to keep on working on it over the remainder of the president's term. Yeah, go ahead.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show, and we're talking American border security using a whole of government approach, and we're talking about interior security and that mass deportation operation that the president campaigned on, promised, and was implemented immediately by immigration enforcement czar Tom Homan, and it continues today. And my guest today is Victor Avila, who is a ICE agent, retired, and an expert in this particular area of law enforcement. And Victor, one of the things that I'm hearing kind of at the rumble level is, Tom Homan might run out of money and he needs more manpower desperately. And that's all probably true. And they're worried the numbers will start going down and we won't be able to maintain and sustain this mass deportation operation at the levels that we need to in order to achieve ultimate success. What's your take on that?
Listen, manpower and money is always welcomed in the federal government, and why not now? Why more so now? This is what the people asked for. This is what they voted for. This is what they want. I think everyone, and this is where I don't know, it gets confusing with party lines, because I think everyone agrees with wanting to have public safety and having a safe neighborhood and national security and having a safe nation. So it is going to come down to obviously some funding, but what we have right now, they're doing pretty good, and they're moving a lot now. A lot of people don't think about. There's a lot of also you've seen movements of personnel. I personally believe there's probably holdovers of other administrations, maybe going back to Obama, that might not be on board with this. So that has to be cleared out. There's a lot of things that need to be ironed out, and the vice president is right. I mean, you can't undo 4 years of damage in 6 weeks, 7 weeks. It's going to take time, but it is going to get better. And you're going to see this well-oiled machine that is going to be very well managed, just like they did, just like the Biden administration did it to bring them in. We're going to do it to bring them out and re-migrate them, like the vice president said. They're going to be going the opposite direction. Now, they did launch that app that really took place of CBP-1 app to come into the country illegally, by the way. That was all illegal. Yeah. Well, guess what? We're going to do DHS has launched their own app saying, you better register here, go home, and if you do that, we're going to consider you to come back into this country legally. If you wait for ICE to come knock on your door, that you're going to be barred from ever coming into the United States. So all these different approaches, I think, will work. Mm-hmm. Another thing, there's a misconception here that first, obviously, they said, and they're very clear, that we're going after the worst of the worst first. Right. We're going after the criminals. We're going after the prior deports. We're going after the ones walking around with a deportation order. I get it, yes. It doesn't mean that we're not going to arrest people that are just in the country illegally. And somehow I think the left started feel very comfortable with that. Like, well, if I'm just here illegal, I'm okay. No, you're not. That's why we have a large number of collaterals, because when they do go get the target, there's 4 or 5 more illegals around the target. You're going to go too. Secretary Mayorkas back then had ignored that as a violation at all. He said they weren't even going to consider it. Those restrictions no longer apply. The restrictions that we're not going to get you at a hospital, at a church, at a courthouse, or all that doesn't exist anymore. We're going to go after you. If you run into a school, we're going to go get you in the school. And I think that they're trying to give excuses as to, well, they arrested a person with no criminal history. Well, they're illegally in the country. That's the broken law. As a matter of fact, they're lucky they're not prosecuting them for being illegally in the country. We're not even prosecuting those. We're just saying we're just going to remove you. And so I think that message has to get out more, so you can see more self-deportations and you can see less activity on the streets. Also, Tom Homan has been wanting these jails to be opened up to ICE officers. They're jails and prisons. That's where these guys are at. Those are the ones that we want. And these sanctuary city policies are blocking ICE from going in and getting them in a secure facility. By the way, Denver last week released a Tren de Aragua gang member from Venezuela, which then I immediately responded. I said, Denver released a terrorist, because they're now on the terrorist list. So we have sanctuary cities. Imagine if you knowingly released an ISIS terrorist member. Yeah. It wouldn't be accepted. So why is it accepted if you're the same terrorist, same group, but your name happens to be Tren de Aragua? Why? Because immigration is attached to it. I'm kind of fed up with it. If immigration is attached to any of these crimes, they seem to get an excuse or a pass from the left.
It's criminal no matter what. If you're breaking the immigration laws, it's criminal. If you are a mayor, I'm talking to you, Mr. Colorado out there, and you're aiding and abetting the release of a terrorist in our society, you are a terrorist and you should be arrested. And I want to see them arrested. Well, let's take one last question from the audience before we get to the end of the show. Go ahead, Rob.
Colonel, we have don't bend the knee. Yes, sir. Thank you, Colonel. So I just heard that the National Guard is now deputized, if I heard that correctly. My son-in-law spent 4 years in the Texas National Guard on the border as active duty, and the reason he didn't re-enlist is because Governor Abbott would not deputize him. So all they were doing was processing people, and he didn't feel like he was doing the country a service. But if they are deputized now, who did deputize them? That's my question. Thank you.
Good question.
That's a great question. So the authority comes straight from the president, but then if you want to break it down by agency, Homeland Security has the authority to deputize. Not every federal agency has the authority. In other words, FBI agent cannot, me as an HSI, which used to be U.S. Customs Service, had the authority to deputize. And so that it was, I know I saw about 300 of them in El Paso be deputized just the last week. I'm not sure where your son was stationed, but they are deputizing National Guard, because I know exactly what you're talking about. I talked to a lot of National Guardsmen, and the frustration, these young guys, 22, 23-year-olds, suited up and waiting there 12 hours to do nothing but allow people to come in. It's demoralizing. As a matter of fact, we had a large number of them take their lives because of it, or a combination of that, whatever was going on. I saw that a lot. And so now they get to be active. Now they get to go and detect and detain and then pass them off to the immigration officials. But that's an extra body that we actually need right now, especially on those gaps that we've been talking about. So, yeah, the authority comes from the president down to the agencies.
Did the governor's offices have to get involved at all, or did the president just nationalize the Guard so they could deputize?
It was the president. Now, because some of our Texas National Guard, and I understand that the state guard versus the division there, the separate, but they let the president do that. What the state did is they deputized the DPS troopers, over 300 of them as well. So we have DPS troopers patrolling, and you get pulled over, and I've seen some videos already of people saying, why do I have to tell you? Because he's now an immigration officer, and he can ask for your alienage. That's what we call it. He could ask you, what country are you a citizen of? And if he determines that maybe you're in the country illegally for several reasons, determining factors, then he could now detain you and take you back to the station and call Border Patrol or ICE and continue that process. That is a huge step that they couldn't do before.
Absolutely. It's just phenomenal what's happening. Nothing's going to be perfect, so we got to make sure that we stay on it and call your legislators, folks, and tell them they need to support that more funding for border security. And there's going to be a line item in the Defense Department's bill, too, so we need to make sure that's in there. Well, Victor, thank you so much for coming on today. Tell folks where they can find you and how they can support you in your current activities.
Yeah, you can follow me on X at Victor Avila TX. You could visit my website. You want to grab a copy of my book, Agent Under Fire. The website is agentunderfirebook.com. And I really want to thank you, Colonel. It was a wonderful discussion today.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Thank you for your service. Thank you for your sacrifice. We pray for you, your colleagues, your families every single day. Well, tomorrow is